Hello, my friends. Today, the situation on the front remains very difficult. However, in an effort to improve it, the Ukrainian forces have begun conducting counterattacks. Let's get straight to the Pokrovsk direction, where the Ukrainian forces are trying to push the Russians back from the village of Shevchenko. It's highly likely that those who failed to hold the defensive line, into which enormous sums of money were invested, have faced consequences. Now they are trying to retake these territories to stabilize the situation and prevent the Russians from advancing further toward the mine. This is why today we are witnessing powerful counteroffensive actions which have been fairly successful so far. Interestingly, Russian war correspondents describe the situation as follows. Pokrovsk direction. The Ukrainian armed forces are counterattacking. A first battle is underway. For the third consecutive day, heavy counterattacks are being launched by the Ukrainians. This time, the Azov brigade has been redeployed to the area and is counterattacking Shevchenko from Zverevo and Peshchane. Right now, intense clashes are happening in the fields between Peshchane and Shevchenko, and on the outskirts of Shevchenko, where Azov forces managed to break through. Additionally, our troops have withdrawn from the Belhika area. Russia's Center group is delivering heavy firepower to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian forces are attempting to prevent the southwest encirclement of Pokrovsk and its subsequent entrapment by the Russian army. As we can see, the Russians are trying to stop the Ukrainian forces' counteroffensive with heavy shelling because they realize that their chances of holding the line are minimal. As a result, they are using the entire available arsenal. This is why the situation remains extremely difficult. However, in any case, the Ukrainian forces have already managed to advance, and fierce fighting is now underway for the village of Shevchenko. Across the rest of the front line, we are also witnessing numerous offensive processes. The Russians have set a task to capture Pokrovsk at all costs. This is a highly valuable city for them due to its resources and strategic position, allowing them to reach the borders of the Donetsk region. Therefore, the battles continue. As of the time this video was made, there have been no new updates along the front line. In the direction of Kurakhove, the situation remains difficult. Here, the Russians continue assaults near Uspenivka in an attempt to fully seize this part of the front. However, it seems counterattacks are also being conducted here to prevent our troops from being encircled. As a result, the Russians haven't made any new advances. Nonetheless, assaults on Konstantinopolsk, Stary Terny, and Zorya continue, but there have been no changes over the past 24 hours. The Ukrainian forces have pointed out that the real situation is being concealed. I don't know who's publishing those useless reports about Kurakhove on the General Staff's page, but they are inaccurate. When the Russians control roughly 70% of the city and are pushing toward the TPP and Dachne, describing the situation as under control and seeing fighting is happening in the southeastern part of the city is absurd. Are we going back to the times of reports like the holding of Solidar, when at the time of reporting we had already withdrawn from the city 3 weeks earlier? This is exactly how it was. I previously said that the Russians had captured Solidar, but someone accused me of lying. However, as time showed, the Ukrainian forces later confirmed the loss of the city only 3 weeks after. So, draw your own conclusions. In the direction of Velika Novosilka, the situation is extremely difficult. This front is now nearly as active as the Kurakhova direction. The Russians are attempting to break through from Rozdolne, launching assaults on the village of Novy Komar, then Velika Novosilka, and advancing near Blagodatne and Storozheve. Similarly, they are trying to push through the fields toward the village of Neskuchne. As we can see, the activity here is at its peak. Reports indicate that after a powerful assault involving significant armored vehicles, new waves of attacks have begun. A hostile column of 9 BMPs and a tank broke through the fields south of Rozdolne and deployed about 50 soldiers in the southern and central parts of the village. Clearly, the situation is gradually worsening. In the Zaporizhia direction, the Russians continue their shelling for now. No new offensive actions have been recorded, and the front line has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Kherson direction, the Russians continue their attacks near Hola Pristan and Novakakhovka. They also shelling the right bank of the river, but no changes in the front line have been reported. Now moving to the Toretsk direction. The activity has slightly decreased. Attacks on Sherbinivka and Deliyevka are currently not being carried out, and the fighting in Toretsk itself hasn't brought any success to the Russians so far. However, the situation remains very difficult, and holding the defense is becoming increasingly challenging as Ukrainian positions are gradually destroyed, forcing the troops to retreat step by step. Still, over the past 24 hours, the front line has remained unchanged, and the Ukrainian forces continue to repel attacks. The situation is described today as follows. No changes for now. After gaining control of the Centralna mine, the Russians began gradually clearing the western and northern outskirts of the city. Meanwhile, our troops are hitting the bastards with drones and FPV drones. In the Chasiv Yar direction, the Russians are storming the city, but no new attacks have been recorded elsewhere, and the number of shelling has temporarily decreased. Over the past 24 hours, the front line remains unchanged. The Ukrainian forces report that the main battles are centered around the plant. The main battle for the refractory plant continues. We understand this is a key position, so we are reinforcing our efforts and launching a new wave of fighting inside the main workshop. In the Syrsk direction, the Russians are assaulting Bilogorivka and attempting to advance near Verkhnyokaminsk. There are also reports of clashes near Spirne and Vyemka. However, no changes in the front line have been observed in the past 24 hours. In the Liman direction, battles are ongoing for Terne, but the Russians have been unable to advance. Although the distance to the river is only 2 kilometers, the Ukrainian forces continue to hold the defense successfully. Meanwhile, in the area of Zarichne, the Russians have failed to break through, preventing any movement toward Liman. In the Borova direction, fighting is underway for Lozova, Zelený Gай, Pershotravneve, and Kopanki. Further south, the Russians are attempting to advance toward Novosergiyevka, assaulting Druzhelyubivka, and pushing across the fields from Makiyevka. However, as before, they have achieved no success, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are currently limiting their actions to shelling, with no new attacks recorded. It appears they are accumulating reserves for another attempt to storm Kupiansk. For now, we wait. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians continue their shelling without launching offensive operations. Meanwhile, fighting in Vovchansk persists, but as before, the Russians have made no progress there. In the Kursk direction, activity remains quite high. In fact, the Russians have about a month and a few days left. Their task is to achieve this before Trump's inauguration. We'll see if they can push the Ukrainian forces beyond the Russian borders in that time. So far, attacks continue in the direction of the town of Suja, and there are also breakthroughs along the border with fighting recorded to the north in the areas of Malalochnya, Ruskaya Porечная, and Novoivanivka. But there have been no new changes over the past 24 hours. However, today, Russian war correspondents are already expressing concerns that the Ukrainian forces are shelling Belgorod region. There is also information about armored vehicles with new markings, which may indicate a new Ukrainian forces offensive. Possibly, this could be in the Belgorod direction. Here is what the Russian war correspondents are writing. It turns out that the general staff should now think not so much about how to recapture Kursk, but how to avoid losing Bryansk or Belgorod regions. The occupation of another region by Ukrainian forces would be a much more powerful blow to the Kremlin and to the president's ego than even the shameful Syrian campaign. And the problems this would cause on the eve of potential peace negotiations are unimaginable. No successes in Donbass can compensate for the loss of new Russian border territories. Regarding Bryansk region, we wouldn't be so categorical. It's possible that the Ukrainian leadership has targeted Gomel region as a significant part of it was once part of the Ukrainian People's Republic, which today's Ukraine considers itself their heir of. Who knows, perhaps they've decided to follow Russia's example and start reclaiming territories that once belonged to them. In general, the Russians are in shock and no longer know what to expect next. Also, foreign publications are reporting today that Trump will develop a plan under which Ukraine will have to give up its occupied lands. Trump needs to create a more complex plan that encourages Ukraine to nominally abandon part of its territory in favor of Russia in exchange for security, which will come with NATO membership, leading to stable peace. To do this, Trump must first expedite the delivery of military aid to Ukraine, which has already been approved, and then announce plans to provide more weapons to hold Russia's continued war ambitions. Putin will begin serious negotiations only when the Russian army can no longer capture new Ukrainian territories, or at least when Russian soldiers start losing positions. Putin must believe that the US will not abandon Ukraine. Trump must also convince Volodymyr Zelensky to agree to end the war. This will not be easy, as it will require the Ukrainian president to abandon the goal of liberating all Ukrainian territories occupied by Russian forces. Ukraine's immediate NATO membership could compensate for these forced territorial concessions, and this is the only card Trump can play to persuade Ukrainians to stop fighting. Trump must personally announce his unequivocal support so that other NATO leaders don't delay the ratification process. The American president must use all his leverage at the start of his term in the White House to achieve the quickest possible peace agreement. Only the possibility of NATO membership can make President Zelensky agree to a formula in which Kyiv will strive for the reunification of Ukraine Ukraine through peaceful means and legally will not recognize the occupation of its territories. Russia is incapable of resisting NATO as it has yet to defeat Ukraine. Ukraine's membership in NATO will strengthen the alliance with a seasoned military and give the West significant economic advantages. Ukraine could also supply other NATO allies with aerial, naval, and ground based drones, which Ukrainian forces have successfully mastered to defend their country. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.